people have creativity in how they solve a problem, or that's where we're the most, our divinity, we're the most, like God.
Welcome to Matters of Soul Importance, where we dive deeply into topics of both earthly and eternal consequence. I'm Roxanne Solonen, faith columnist and features writer for The Forum, author and speaker. In this episode, I ask Katie Bruckbauer, are poetry and dance bedfellows of the soul? This past spring, I was invited to see Katie on stage, where she did a dance performance matched to her debut book, Time to Soar, Word Dances and Bird Songs for Every Season. Though I've known Katie for several decades, including of her passion for dance, and I've been acquainted with her wittiness through her clever yearly family Christmas newsletter and church skits, I was newly touched by her melding of dance and poetry on stage. It was graceful, poignant, and obviously touched the hearts of the packed crowd gathered at the Sanctuary Event Center here in Fargo, as evidenced by the standing ovation at the end. That performance inspired me to ask Katie if she would share about her journey of bringing her love of dance and poetry into this new form. I also wanted to know how this latest project has rejuvenated her soul, especially after the world's experience of isolation during the pandemic. In our conversation, we'll explore how these two creative pursuits have come together in the life of one individual, and perhaps encourage other artists to return to their passions or pick them up with more vigor to revive their souls. Now, let's hear it from Katie. Good morning, Katie.
Good morning.
This is so nice to have you here.
This is exciting.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here on Matters of Soul Importance. And we're going to talk today about something kind of fun. Sometimes the topics are more heavy, but now we're going to go into there's always some bittersweetness in any topic, but dance and poetry sounds like a fun topic, and I know it will be. So the question of the day is, can they fit together? Are they bedfellows of the soul, is how I put it. So we're going to kind of go through your story of how you match these two. And I've known you, up front, I have to be honest, for several decades. So I was thinking last night, if Olivia is going to be 27 and she was a baby when we met. So that's almost 30 years. Oh my gosh, that makes me feel old, but that's wonderful. Golden friends are awesome. So, but I'm going to pretend that I don't know you as well as I do here today. Of course, there's always things to know about people that we don't know, and especially this journey that you've taken. So I'm excited to hear about it. So you found a way to bring those together, Katie. I just want to know a little bit about how that all started. So let's go back. Let's simplify it here. Let's talk a little bit about your growing up. You grew up on a farm, and I know, at one time agriculture, like a lot of people were growing up on farms, but it's not so common anymore. So I've heard a lot of stories through the years about how you grew up with your cousins, and it was in some ways a carefree life where your creativity was allowed to flourish. And as you romped around with your cousins, and tell us just some of the highlights of that experience.
Well, I'm the fourth child of 8 kids in my family, and we grew up just with a grove of trees in between another set of cousins that had 12 kids. And, we all pretty much had they had 4 before any of ours. But we all had a matching age just about. And then another set of cousins that were in Casselton had 10 kids. So, and they all farmed together. And then that was just on one side of the family. And then, other cousins on my dad's side, that quite a few that lived in town. So yes, we were surrounded by big families and, and cousins. So there was always playmates. And I think being a middle kid, like the older ones probably had to do more work. We've talked about it. I was the oldest of the little kids, and I felt like I was a little kid till, I'm in college. Like, when are we not the little kids anymore? But I think that really gave us, we played. And we were always very well provided for, but we didn't have a lot of stuff. Mm-hmm. And so we played house, we played school, we played church. We played, cops and robbers. We made forts in the woods. We ran around a lot and just did a lot of physical. I don't think I really had like an artsy growing up. I wouldn't say at all, but, we sang around the piano, learned to polka when we were little and, polka'd with our cousins. And so all of that, I think though, just the play and the being free to, make up our own stuff really maybe fostered some of that.
I'm thinking of the dynamics, and it's one thing to have siblings, but sometimes there's like a power struggle within that structure, and sometimes the littler ones get kind of overpowered. I can sense that having the cousins who weren't siblings kind of mitigated that a little bit. So,
and we would play like they had a big, huge bedroom with 7 kids slept in there, I think, and we'd put socks on the floor and they were there was a lot of us playing together a lot of times. And we'd exchange kids a lot.
Oh yeah. Passing back and forth. That's awesome. Well, that's a beautiful experience. And so, but at some point there was some creativity that came in there in terms of like, how did the dancing thing start? I don't think I've ever asked you that.
Okay. I started, my sisters and I, my younger sisters, and then my cousin Barb and her younger sisters, we were the same age. We started dancing when we were about 10. And we were, after probably a year or so, Barb and I were the 2 oldest. And so we kind of got special treatment. It was just a young woman. She was in high school, I think, when she started, and then through college in their garage in town in Casselton. And so, that was where I learned just sort of the basics and learned to like, oh, I love this. And I remember one dance where it wasn't just more like a cute dance. It was a dance that had meaning, and that was the first time it was like, oh, this is what I love this. Cause I was shy in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But dance, you can dance. I love performing, but I'm kind of shy. Yeah. So to dance and not have to speak I love that. And then our teacher moved then. And so Barb and I were about 16 and they let us teach in her garage. And, now I think, oh, we didn't really know anything.
Yeah.
But we did
and
what
you had
we
each
could.
other too.
We had each other and we choreographed together and we'd go to track practice, and then run over to the dance studio for an hour and teach a class.
Wow.
And it was...
That's so cool. We had a dance instructor too for like a year or something. And I loved it too, but then she left. And so, and then I didn't have anyone like a cousin to carry that out. So I remember that. And I went to a dance and acting. It was a Girl Scout wider opportunity in Pennsylvania. And I liked the acting part. I'd already been doing that, but the dancing part was new. And we put together we had to put together like a little thing at the end. And that's my love for it kind of picked up. And then I remember I was like trying to make up a routine to Purple Rain in my living room, but I didn't have the training. So there was a something in there, a spark with me too. I was a cheerleader too. So I mean, I knew about body movement and how it can do something beyond,
Renee Moose was our teacher, and she was just lovely. And, really, I think helped us get going. Like she gave us taught us some lesson plans or, how to go about it when we first started and really, developed a lot of confidence in us at that time.
I do want to talk about your faith life growing up too, but before we go into that, I still want to kind of follow this trajectory of you becoming a dancer, because it's one thing to like something as a child, as I did too, but then you went ahead and continue to follow that.
Yeah, so I didn't actually major in dance, but got a liberal studies degree from St. Ben's, College of St. Benedict, and took as much like with an emphasis in modern dance. And once I discovered modern dance, it was like, okay, this is this feels the most like me. And I think, I learned, I did a summer intensive in Seattle. Barb and I actually went there together and learned a lot about creative movement and how to teach that. And it was just, it's like, this is what I want to do. And I think I've always been a good teacher and but I'm really single focused. So like just having one thing to teach, not like in an elementary classroom or something where you have 10 subjects.
Yeah.
So, and then after college, when I came back to Fargo, went to a performance by a modern company in town, Makata Dance Theater. And it was like, oh my gosh. And so I joined that, and that kind of started my performing and then really my teaching here too.
Okay. And was Barb with you?
Barb was in that too.
Okay.
Yep.
So you just really kind of had that little shadow buddy. The whole
we were together through the whole, through all of it. Yeah.
That's how I am. I mean, I think I'm the youngest sister of just one other sister. And I always like to have that helpmate along the way. I think there's something about creativity paired with another creative person that I like working with people on creative projects.
Yeah,
so,
I do too.
And we'll kind of lead, because you kind of did that with with this book too. Yeah. So let's go back. Tell me a little bit about your faith life as a child. You had this big family, and what was
oh gosh. Well, we went to the Catholic Church in Casselton and were involved there. My mom and dad were very involved, and they were both always reading and learning and challenging authority and all kinds of things like that I learned from. And music was always, learned to play guitar really young, so I was involved with singing for church forever.
Because I know that came back later in liturgical dance at some point. But before we go, we don't have to go there right now. So you were a dance. You became a performer and then an instructor. And I just remember the stories about there were three of you at one point. You were all at some point pregnant.
Yeah, at Makata Dance Theater in those days, we really were a family, and Barb and Leah and I all became pregnant and had our first babies within a month of each other, which was both really wonderful and extremely challenging. The challenging part of being a dancer is, you really making money, a living it's pretty impossible. And, so initially we were trying to rehearse and learn dances, and we had 3 babies up there, and usually one of them was screaming their heads off. So once they started crawling or running, it was like, we can't do this. But, we took care of each other's kids, and, it wasn't your typical dance company really, but it was, when you dance with people, you really, there's just this connection that you have to.
Yeah. Well, one of the times my daughters took dance from you, and then I loved, even before they were in dance, when I was introduced to the Advent program at Nativity Catholic school, it was just a beautiful. Yeah, you did such a beautiful job with that. Share a little bit about how you got into that.
Well, I first started doing liturgical dance. It was actually, Barb and I were in college. I think it was our senior year, and we were doing this individualized study. And Sharon Balcom at Nativity Church asked us to dance for I can't remember which came first. There was a dedication of the new church, I think, and then for their Holy Triduum, Holy Week services. And so that was a big, huge project that we took on, and it kind of continued ever after. Not ever after, but for quite some time that I, did that, and then. At one point, probably back in about 2000, the music teacher asked if I would help her with kids for the Advent program. So ever since, we've done 4th and 5th graders. They get to boys and girls, they choose if they want to do it or not. And yeah, it's really cool because it's a lot of them. It's the first and maybe only time they've ever performed or ever danced. Put their movement in their own body in time with the music and to make something beautiful with a group. And some come in super timid and some just absolutely, you can just tell like they are just on fire for it. There was one little girl last year that said, I was talking to him about maybe being a little nervous, and I'm not nervous one bit. I have been waiting my whole life for this.
That's awesome. I was going to ask you some of the stories. Do you have any others of just people kind of coming out of their...
I remember one boy that just loved it. He just didn't fit in maybe necessarily with his classmates, or he wasn't a rough and tumble kid, but it was like, oh my gosh, and I later saw him on the stage, in other musicals and shows and throughout his life.
I know. And when you hear those little things, like as an author and having done school visits, there's certain kids, and it's like, it reminds you of your little girl, like the way they respond and the excitement of having that creative part of themselves be able to be released.
Yeah, because so much of our, like our learning it's all in our head. And, it's really, I think dance is just a way to bring it all together into, with your body. And we use our bodies. I mean, we talk with our hands. If we're sad, we might be bent over, or if we're joyful, I mean, you can see it in somebody's walk. So this is just, more of maybe an exaggeration or a stylization of some of those feelings, and putting
it's the bodily expression of who we are.
We're humans with bodies.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
it kind of is, it's incarnational. Like I've used that word recently for something else, but we are not just souls. Like we are an embodied soul.
Yes.
and the two are linked.
we carry, we carry our traumas in our bodies. I mean, I went through a spell where I was like, I've had extreme anxiety, and it was like my body took over. I mean, I had absolutely no control of it. It was my heart rate, everything. So, then why not use our bodies also in a way to heal and to, work through some of those things and express it.
My mother-in-law had cancer 2 times, and she insists, and my husband was 3rd grade, I think, the first time. She says it was because of stress. Like her body just, was taking in the stress and she wasn't releasing it. Yep. And she's just certain. So I think of that a lot when I'm really stressed. Like, okay, I have to release this somehow. Otherwise, I'm going to have, it's going to do something inside.
Yes,
like
it does.
You can't resist that forever. I mean, it just is impossible as a human being. So well, that leads in perfectly for this book, because I know that this was somewhat of a release. So first of all, you have a new book that in your first book, it's Beautiful Time to Soar. And it is a melding of the dance, and well, you melded into a dance, but there's this other part of you that came out. So share a little bit about how you ended up writing a book, a poetry book.
Okay. Well, I think I've always liked, I think dance and poetry are very similar in that you kind of have these elements. In poetry, you have words, and symbols, but there's this inner, a way you want to try and express it in like few words, so it's playing around with those words, and I love playing with just, symbols and sounds of words and rhyming and rhythm, which connects with my dance. So my poetry is very rhythmical, I would say, and, rhyming, which isn't maybe, I don't know, it's not the popular way for people to write poetry, but it's the way I have to write it. And then dance is also, you have all these elements, time, space, the body, what the body can do, the movement, vocabulary, and you have to play with it and let it flow and find what works. And, So they're both kind of puzzle-like in some ways. I love puzzles.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You know, so
that's true.
how they fit together. It's like, okay, yeah, it's taking it, and sometimes you're like, oh my gosh, like you're surprised by what comes together.
It's kind of like the message is a little bit masked in a way because you don't want to impede your whatever, you want the recipient of your art to have their own experience, right?
They can watch it and they might take something different than what you had in mind, and that's okay.
And you have to leave a little room, as in poetry,
right,
for interpretation.
Yes.
And that's modern dance too.
Yes.
So it's not so pointed.
Right.
Yeah.
So I've always loved that. I think I've always done little ditties for people when I was growing up, but probably in the last 10 years, I would say I think it was a time my dance studio closed, so I wasn't doing creative work that way. I was doing a lot of caretaking for both my grandkids and my aging parents. So there's a lot of time for thinking. I was going through a lot of, empty nest kind of stuff too, and soul searching and
tons of transition.
Yes. And it felt like my life was kind of ending, like, and a lot of questioning and feeling that it was a lot of anxiety of not knowing and dealing with that and learning, kind of unlearning some things I'd learned growing up and in my faith or in my church life, embracing some new ideas. All of that kind of were circling around. And so after my mom died in 2016, I wrote several poems. I wrote a book of poems just for my family about her and about her dying process. And then I did it again after my dad died in early 2019. So they died really almost 2 years apart. But during that time, too, I was really experiencing a lot of anxiety. And so I started writing to help myself process. And rather than just staying up in my head and spinning and spinning, it was like getting it down on paper and what am I really what am I thinking here? And then I'd also, started really delving into some yoga and mindfulness and dancing mindfulness and all those things that they talk more about, like noticing, listening to your deep inner self and like noticing what's outside of you too, and bringing that in and how does that speak to you? And so I guess all of that kind of combined into my writing. And I never had an idea that I was going to write a poetry book. I just was writing to get through this awful time.
But I know that you appreciated poetry and literature and books because I remember when you were a younger mom and we had your youngest and my oldest were the same age. And so you would, you were a frequenter at the library or had a little library at your own house sometimes, I think, right?
I don't know.
I was thinking that you had your kids check out. I can't remember, but anyway.
No, I love, I love it. Yeah. But I hadn't really used it in a therapeutic way. And so, and then after I started sharing some, my closest friends or family, sisters, they were just like, oh, you can't just keep this for yourself. So that was a whole next step was like, oh, I have no idea how to do this. And scared to death. You
did do you brought it in though before that with others' creation, like Old Turtle. You did a Old Turtle.
Oh yeah,
right. Using so you had like
I've combined dance and other people's literature. Yes, yes. But dance was not really on my radar at that when I was writing all this, like to dance it. So initially, then I met with my cousin Mary Jo, who I grew up with as well, same age as me. And she was going to help me with some technology stuff because I'm not adept at that. And then we were just sitting there and I was talking about kind of how was thinking about once I had decided to actually try to put this into a book, about putting it with the seasons and the bird. A lot of the poems are about birds. So kind of mixing those. But she just drew this little sketch, and it was just like, oh my gosh, Mary Jo, could you do this? And she was like, well, would you want me to? It was just the whole weekend that we were together just felt like God was there, like it was not imagined. So that started it. And then, we went through a lot of ups and downs. Like I had a certain vision and it didn't really match with hers. And
yeah.
So
there's always some tension also in a collaboration.
Yes,
always. Yeah.
And learning to be like, and for quite a long time, I didn't speak up, I didn't want to hurt her feelings and then we had to learn to be like completely honest with each other and say, well, I love that. I think this could be different. And, she did the same with some of my poetry even, because she's a good writer herself. So,
but still that first glimpse of like the manifestation of your thoughts on paper
it was just like, oh, that is so cool. And it, and then it really evolved. Yeah. But it was really, for me anyway, like a stepping forward in faith, one blind step at a time. I mean, it wasn't like this whole thing opened up like, oh, it's going to be like this.
Yeah.
No, that's creativity doesn't really work that way.
Yeah. Well, I want to hear more about the book making process and how that went from here, but we'll take a little break and then we'll come back and hear how you put this book together and then how you brought it onto the stage, which was a whole other step that you weren't expecting, right? So we'll be back with more Matters of Soul Importance with Katie Bruckbauer after this break.
Get 3 months of local news for just 99 cents a month. You'll get unlimited access to the news you need to stay engaged and connected to your community. Visit inforum.com/subscribe now to get 3 months of local news for only 99 cents a month.
Welcome back to Matters of Soul Importance. This is Roxanne Solonen and Katie Bruckbauer, my friend, a dancer and poet and now author and performer. Well, she's always been a performer, but anyway. So I know that during the time that this book was being formulated, before you knew it was going to be a book, I think, COVID was happening. And that was a hard time for many people. And I think a lot of us were confused, and we were talking earlier about how sometimes we get too much inside of our head. I think that was a time where a lot of us were stuck inside of our head because we didn't know what was going on. Share a little bit about the trials of that time and how these birds spoke to you. I'm a lover of nature and birds myself, so that's one of the reasons I love this book. So, but how did the birds bring you back to life?
Okay, well I never used to be a bird lover. I mean, my mom always loved to watch birds, and I was kind of too busy. But but then as I've gotten older and had more time, it's like, and then they seem to be speaking to me, And
the subtitle is Word Dances and Bird Songs for Every Season. I didn't mention that earlier, but there's definitely a theme of birds, and there's a little bird on a tree with different seasons on the cover.
Yeah. I think the first bird that really, I've had connection with an eagle, with a friend that had died. There's, after my dad died, I was writing thank yous, and there was a cardinal just outside my window, just like I'd never seen a cardinal in real life before, I don't think, or noticed.
Yeah.
And so then I got a bird feeder, and started but watching birds. But I think with during the pandemic, there was just more time for, there weren't a lot of outside distractions. So there was time that, and in some ways it was good for me, like to have that really focused time where I could write and notice. But it also was extremely anxiety producing time. And I didn't grow up with conflict, really, and I don't handle conflict very well. And so at that time, there was so much conflict and conflict within, my own family, and, everybody had a different opinion, and everybody seemed like they were mad at each other and, just villainizing the other side. And I just felt so, ugh.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I like one-on-one stuff with people. I didn't really, the Zoom was nice because it connected us in some ways. And I had my kids, my daughter lives next door. So we were still, I wasn't nearly as isolated as some people were, but there was just so much uncertainty and upheaval. It seemed like that it was like, I just did a lot of like, how can we live with this?
And you had a lot of grief going on because your mom had recently died, and did your dad die?
My dad had died the year before.
Yeah.
And
so you were still, that's a lot.
I was still, and then, my kids, couple of my kids were really struggling because they didn't have their jobs quit. They were in like service type jobs and things where, so, they both actually moved back for a while. And so, you've got that tension and trying to not carry other people's suffering. To support it, but not to carry it.
And moms tend to.
So, I had to learn a lot. And I feel like God was speaking to me a lot in my dreams and in these birds and in some of the insights that came through. I know, like, I was just thinking about this today. The Wise Owl poem that I wrote, that was a weekend. It was after the George Floyd thing, and there was the riot in Fargo, and it was just like, oh my gosh, what?
The world is falling apart.
Yeah, and what can I do? And I just started writing about the wise owl, and like, why is an owl called wise?
Do you want to share that? I feel like maybe it's since you're talking about it.
I can.
Yeah.
Why is an owl called wise? Does that come as a surprise? Or sound a bit absurd since he's not the brightest bird? His skill is catching prey. He sleeps away the day. Wise ones look for something more. Let's go deeper. Let's explore. Why is an owl called wise? Maybe it's his eyes, so human-like and forward-facing, large and round, so all-embracing, seeing things in dark of night that others can't in broad daylight. Wise ones see with great precision, hearts of things with knowing vision. Why is an owl called wise? Could it be? Did you realize his head is capable of turning almost fully round for learning more than just one point of view? Right, left, behind, what's true? Wise ones see with broad perspectives, unlike those a rigid neck gives. Why is an owl called wise? Is it his ears that maximize his gift, exceptionally keen, for hearing things afar, unseen? Intently listening, quiet, mute. When timing's right, he gives a hoot. Wise ones listen, quiet, heedful, only speaking when it's needful. Why is an owl called wise? All these reasons I surmise. And even though he's just a bird, would you agree? Would you concur that people need a wise old sage to follow in this day and age? Wise ones, come, make an avowal, seek to learn the ways of owl.
Your poems evoke a lot of questions and pause and thought. And that's what a poem should do. And, even though you said earlier, maybe it's not whatever structurally something you learn in an English class or something, I don't know, but I think they're very relatable and very, your heart is revealed in that. And I can see the owl, and it's a powerful image, and there's just so much there. And
Thanks.
also, I love your play with words. So, and you've been doing that, like, you've had lots of practice. Like, I want to talk about that a little bit. The skits that you've done at church and different things. We have a friend group that used to do a big splash for 40-year part. You've done a lot of birthday parties, and they are
odes,
so
anniversaries.
fun.
Yeah.
How did that start?
There was one skit. I went to a basketball camp in high school, and we call it the Flush It, Plunge It skit, because it was, oh gosh, or the da-da-da-da-da, where, we're the kids here, and then they have all these different parts, like flush it, plunge it. I'm a plumber, I would be. And then, so I have used that format in a zillion ways. And then someone else that had written this kind of rap, kids, it was actually Penny and Pals.
Okay.
Penny from Penny and Pals had a song, and that's when I started doing kind of some a little rappy type things, but sort of with that same idea through it. And I don't know, trying to find the heart of what makes that person who they really are, and and then putting it into a fun, crazy,
kind of celebratory, and yet there's some like moments of serious truth in there,
right?
Maybe.
Yeah. Like, how do you encompass that person, or what that person means to you I always resist when I have to start one, because it's so much and
That's the
I'll never
process.
and that self-doubt that always comes in, that I won't be able to do it this time, or it's not gonna be good enough. Or
I don't think everyone realizes like the mental energy that goes into, even like when I write my news stories, I've got all these piles of things, and it's just like a pile, and I have to figure out how to make it cohesive and in a way that others can, and every time I'm like, ugh.
Well, and that's like how it is with dance too.
Yeah.
Like you just have to start, and then, start moving, and then, I like the way that felt, or that flow nicely, and then I'm gonna, as I'm talking, I'm moving. But you have to just sort of jump in and then get going. But it's really hard.
Yeah, the beauty comes later, when you can stand back and all of a sudden you've created something that wasn't before, and now you're looking at it, and then of course it's meant to be shared with others. And
right.
that's one thing. We do it for ourselves initially, but like your friends were encouraging you to do.
But it's really scary.
Yeah. Oh.
And it's like, okay, I'm bearing my soul here, and someone's going to judge this.
Yeah.
And it's really trying to let go of your ego, and to go, okay, this is what I do. Like this is. It doesn't matter what somebody thinks, but every time it's having to work through that, for me anyway.
A lot of people won't take that step because they don't want to be naked. And that's what it feels like. It feels like you're naked. And
that's like, that let go poem. And we need to talk about Barb's part in all of this too, with how with the performance.
Yes, definitely. Let's go. So first the book, and you worked with her on that. How did that performance take shape? Was it something that was evolving as the book was coming into form, or?
Yes. Okay. I never intended to write a book. I never intended to choreograph, do a dance performance. Was actually, someone has suggested, like, well, why don't you, actually, it was at the time I had written the poems, they were done. Mary Jo was working on illustrating the book, and then after that, getting it formatted. She did all of that work. She was amazing. And so in the meantime, it was kind of like, oh, what am I doing here now? And what? So someone suggested that I, why don't you try dancing your poetry? And so, actually, it was my therapist. I'll just say it.
There we go.
And so I thought, I hadn't thought of that. So I choreographed the first stanza to Two Birds, this poem. And I went back the next week and did it for her, and it brought her to tears.
Oh.
And so I was like, so I guess I should continue, huh? So then I started just working on that and started thinking and choreographing a lot of them just on my own. And, and so it got to be, though, at one point, it was like, okay, this is really too much for me to do all of it. And so I just thought, you know what, I'm going to reach out to Barb, my other cousin that I danced with. And even then it was a little bit like, oh, what if she thinks this is dumb? But I was like, Barb, would you ever help me with this? And she was thrilled, and like, yes. So, and like I had already choreographed the swan dance for myself, but I was like, Barb, you are the swan. Like, you should do the swan. She's, I'm short and more muscular dancer. She's long and has this gorgeous long neck and long arms and legs. And I was like, you are the swan. So she did that. And then, I asked her to do a couple other ones that she was interested in trying. And then we also incorporated some former dance students that are now adults, a couple that live in town here. Would you like to join us? And so it just kept moving and evolving. And so we had probably, a year and a half of working on that and costuming. And
you've always been great at costuming. And I remember your basement or lower level of your house that used to be closer to me, full of all the...
Oh, yeah. I've got at least 20 tubs of costumes. And some I haven't used, but, it's like a piece from here and something from there. And so we were able to incorporate some even back from our performing days in like the 1980s in Dakota Dance Theater that for the winter, we have one called Wonder, a dance that Barb choreographed, and she took her imagery for that dance was from the wonder of winter trees. She lives in Park Rapids area now, and the trees are so gorgeous in the winter. And so we had these costumes that we were able to use that kind of gave that wintry, windy, light, air, snowy feel to them. And
the thing about seasons is that we all can relate. It's not a subject that's going to be off-putting to anyone.
Right. Like the book is divided into seasons. It starts with spring, and so so the birds of springtime that we are so excited to see in the spring, those poems are in that section, and then the poems about growth and new life and the messiness of how messy that struggle for new life and growth actually is. There are moments of beauty, but there's also a lot of really hard, difficult times, and then summer has more of the abundance and,
do you want to share? I want you to share another one if you would.
Sure.
Whatever one.
Well, I was thinking if we have time, I've got the two, my two from summer that deal with what you're feeding yourself.
Okay, sure.
One's really short, and
okay,
and the first one is very light and whimsical, and it shows really like the lighthearted, silly side of life too, and so the book isn't all just heavy stuff.
Not at all. Yeah, no.
So this one, it's about like what you're feeding yourself, both literally and figuratively.
Okay.
This one's called Orioles. Do Orioles eat Oreos, single stuffed or double? Do Orioles chew Orbit gum or opt for ones that bubble? Do Orioles order out for Prego or Ragu over Oricetti pasta or organic orzo stew? Or what about a ride of taters, hash browned or French fried? An omelet with oregano or eggs cooked sunny side? Oh my goodness, no, an Oriole would never overdose on Orville Redenbacher's popcorn ever. But an Oriole will orient round oranges or grape jelly. Ordinarily, that's what he'd choose to fill his belly.
I love it. Keep those O's in there.
Yeah. And then this one This one is called Two Birds, and it does have movement, a dance that I recite while I read it.
Before you go on, I have to tell you, when I was little, I thought, when I heard the word Oriole, I thought it was an Oreo.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
Okay. Two birds. Two birds dwelling deep within. One coos, one squawks. Who will have dominion? The white dove or the hawk? They're settled and established. Their nests are built to stay. The one I feed and nourish will have the final say. Hawk is hate personified. She's always seeking prey. To keep herself protected, violence wins the day. Feed her with a feast of fear, a plate of puffed up pride, self-righteous indignation. She'll feel justified. Entrees of green envy, snacks of spit and spite, dishes of delusion, meals of might makes right. Let her nosh on negatives, nurse a nagging grudge. Hawk will soar and grow into a fierce and ruthless judge. Dove is love and peacefulness. These her greatest passion. She wants to fill the world with loving kindness and compassion. Let her munch on mercy, graze on gratitude, find flavor in forgiveness, an accepting attitude. She'll need a course of courage, a piece of humble pie, a serving of self-love and care to grow a gentle eye. A menu made with mindfulness, a diet of devotion, prayer, and contemplation will set this all in motion. Nurture her with nature, the sky, the sun, the earth, drinking from the source of life that brought this all to birth. Attend to her mournful cry, heal her wounded wing, fill her cup with gladness, and listen to her sing. Two birds dwelling deep within, one coos, one squawks. Who will have dominion? The white dove or the hawk? They're settled and established. Their nests are built to stay. The one I feed will flourish. Love will win the day.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
And it's that dichotomy of the little angel and the devil on our shoulders. Like we all have to fight with what we're going to be, what we're going to feed in our life. And every human being has to face those two.
Yeah. And, I think you maybe don't necessarily, I think, get there by denying what, it's where you put the energy into, what you, just worry about feeding the one and the rest
They're both there.
They're both
going to be there.
They're both there.
Yeah. Another thought that strikes me is we're middle-aged and I know there's that, we're talking about that period of transition where you're trying to is there anything left? Do I have anything more to give this world? Especially in terms of the newness of creation. And there is a time in middle life or, middle age. And as you're going into your silver years where you wonder if you're used up, if your time has come. But you know what? I see such wisdom and I think it's so beautiful because to be at this point in your life, all these things came together. And then I also love the community, it wasn't just you isolated, all these different people came into it. But it was all these years, you couldn't have done this back then, know.
And I really feel like I was led down this path. And, and there was a whole long time, it was a really long spell of not knowing
Mm-hmm.
And, learning to embrace that not knowing and that anxiety and that, I think I spent so much of my life bracing against what was coming or, being fearful. And I probably will always have that to some extent, but that learning to embrace the face before you
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
embrace the place you're in.
Mm-hmm.
And don't brace against today, tomorrow, open it up and that's where you find the grace. That's where that poem came from.
But that tension actually makes everything richer, because going through that journey, if you didn't have that, that's what makes it so rich in the end, what you create, because you did have to kind of fight through it and choose.
Yes. And you feel, I really felt like I was just dying inside.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so learning to trust that time, trust the falling, trust that there will be spring, something new will come. Yeah. But God, it takes a long time.
Yeah. Well, I just remember when you said spring, every spring, Katie makes grass grow in little pots. And I've been the recipient of many of those. And it's just such a, I love spring. I know you do too. Everything comes to life, and you grew up in a farming family, and it's just everything seems so dead for a long time. And around here, we have a long period of deadness. And when spring comes, I don't know that.
Can I read that first poem?
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely. Yes. No, I love.
Okay. Because that one, it was every year in spring, I dream about this perfect day. And, that's what I think of as spring, when it's just beautiful and sunny and 70 degrees and, the birds are chirping. Well, that's not really what spring is. Spring is things are thawing and melting, and you see the garbage from the whole winter and the dog poop in your backyard. And it's lots of days of just cold and wind and rain. And that's what new life and growth is. And so, and it's all it's all necessary and it's all good. Mm-hmm. So my first poem of my book is called Holy Shit. And it goes like this. Holy shit. An oxymoron. Or is it?
Again, thought-provoking.
Yes. Okay, all those things we want to push away from our life that we don't think are holy or good. Do we I don't know. Maybe, there's...
Life is messy.
Life is messy. There's value in all those struggles and...
In the mud. In the muck.
In the muck. And the shit.
So, Katie, how would you there might be someone out there that has struggled too. Maybe they're in the stopping point right now and trying to figure out where do I move? How do I just give up? There's so much about hope in this. And how do you, I think hope is what everyone needs, and we need it. We need it daily. So we might not have it figured out in any one given moment, but if anyone is stuck out there or has kind of turned their back on their creativity or just doesn't believe they're creative, which we know is a lie,
right.
What would you do to encourage them based on your own experience?
I feel like we all have creativity within us. Okay, maybe it's not in art. Don't ask me to draw.
Me too. Stick figures, maybe.
But yeah, people have creativity in how they solve a problem, or that's where we're the most, our divinity, we're the most, like God, is that ability, and to trust that inner part of you, that if there's something that wants to come out, let it, or work to develop it, or, if you are stuck in the, just trust the falling and trust the rising. I had to learn to really, it was kind of safe being stuck too. Mm-hmm. Not expecting anything of myself. Mm-hmm. And so it took a lot of courage to trust the rising and
And we need people around us too. That's what I'm thinking too. Like, we do need those voices of encouragement. We need, like a little community. I'm not saying they travel with us every moment, but at some point we need others too.
Oh gosh, my therapist, my friends, my, working with Mary Jo and with Barb, and encouragement from people. And,
it's never an
and
isolating.
Everybody is so different. Everybody has such different gifts. And, like this book, I think, is about bringing in, accepting all the parts of yourself. And then like, how can we carry that out into the world and like accept others and what they have. And the other thing too is like, we're all going to do it differently, and that's okay. Like I love this quote by Rumi, who's a Sufi mystic ancient, but he says there's 1,000 ways to kneel and kiss the ground. And I just love that. Like, I'm doing that with, writing poems about birds and my dancing, and, you do it in a different way in your writing, or we all have ways to express that.
All unique, completely unique. And that's so beautiful. I was thinking as you were reminding me or talking about the performance that you did, did anyone take a video? Like, is it out there somewhere, or?
We have, yes, I do have video. There is the Two Birds poem is performed on my website. You can see that on there. That's called worddances.com.
Okay.
And we do have some other ones too. Some of them I don't have like the rights to put the music online. Okay. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, so what I always come back to that initial question, which I know is kind of more of a generic question to get us started into the conversation, but are poetry and dance bedfellows of the soul, would you say, Katie?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. For me, they go together. They're just, and, as far as the soul, when I dance or when I write, it's coming from the deepest part of me, and which I feel is the soul. And so, yeah, yes, that's the only way. I mean, it's the deepest, closest thing I have to. I mean, I call it's prayer for me.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here and sharing all that.
Thank you for having me.
It's so fun to have known you for so many years, and I think that's what made me so. It was just so beautiful to see all of these different talents and parts of your life come together. And again, I think that's one of the beautiful things about not being young. And yes, young people have their own things to share, but we can be old and have something to offer.
Someone told me like a young person couldn't have written some of this.
Right.
Like, so
yeah. So thank you. Thank you for saying yes, even though it was scary at times.
It was.
Yeah.
It still is.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out how to go forward.
But thank you for being on Matters of Soul Importance. And I hope people will check out your book. It's really beautiful. And I am leaving all the information in the show notes if you didn't catch it. So make sure to check that out.
Yeah. They can order books on my website or through Amazon.
Wonderful. Thank you, Katie.
Yeah. Thank you.
Are poetry and dance bedfellows of the soul? Well, even though my teenage dream of becoming a dancer, as I worked out my routine to Prince's When the Doves Cry in our family living room all those years ago was short-lived, I can say that poetry has seemed part of my DNA. I grew up hearing my father, who was very clever with writing, say, "She's a poet and don't know it." Certainly, I have dabbled in poetry and been blessed to work with and be entertained by friends who were great poets. But my writing has largely moved in a different direction for practical reasons as much as anything. Nevertheless, both poetry and dance have part of my heart. And when Katie performed her poetry as dance on stage late last year, I recognized it as something very special. Seeing Katie's gifts come together in such a tender, pure, honest, beautiful way lifted my soul. Though I had recalled it being in spring, I was mistaken. In fact, it was November, but the performance, filled as it was with birds and birdsong, must have placed me in a mindset of spring, my favorite season next to fall. Speaking of that performance, in the show notes of this podcast, the first bulleted point will bring you to a YouTube link where you can see Katie on stage that day performing her poem, Two Birds. It's very hard to show a performance in an audio podcast, so visiting the link will offer a more vivid example of the beauty of the soul's movement through physical expression, something Katie is masterful at. Beyond her creative gifts, however, Katie has a generous, welcoming heart. Years ago, as a young mom new to the area, I was invited by Katie to be part of a faith group that stayed together for several decades and remains in touch to this day. Our daughters were beneficiaries of her instruction in modern dance in their younger years, and we delighted in their dance recitals for many splendid springs. My gratitude for the many ways Katie has blessed me and my family through the years brings me to this moment of wanting to make something of a return. Katie, may you be blessed many times over for the beauty you have brought the world through your dance and poetry, showing us that indeed they are the best of bedfellows. In our next episode, Max and Micah Fisher will help answer a question of perplexity in today's world. Where did all the young faith-filled families go? Until then, don't lose sight of the light.